Social Security is one of the most dependable things that we have.
My wife actually receives disability, so I would say it's vitally important to me as well that she's able to receive her Social Security disability payments to help maintain the household.
You work most of your life and hoping to get some out of it, which I did, and I'm grateful for it.
I wouldn't be able to make ends meet if I wouldn't have this check. We'd have to cut on either food or medication.
My cousin, and she gets it, and she can't get around a lot, and her health is real bad, and that's her only income of surviving.
This was a benefit that was promised to us for being hardworking people, and we contributed accordingly, and I guess, yeah, I didn't even think twice that Social Security will be there for me, like most of us this age.
It will mean the world to me when I do start receiving it, and anything less than what I'm expecting, I won't be able to live within my budget.
I did work for a major corporation that I was vested in, but that company went under and divested, and I was counting on that for a major portion of my income at retirement, and that didn't work out. Social Security is the safety net.
The uncertainty of what's it gonna look like in the future, because everything's going up, the government's looking for areas to cut, and that's the first place they're gonna look like, let's cut Social Security. And it's infuriating because I've been paying into Social Security since I've been working, so I deserve that. Anybody who's paying into that pot should benefit from getting Social Security, period, point blank. That's just non-negotiable. That should not be touched because you need that for people to survive.
If you work all your life and if you got a disability, then I think they should give you Social Security.
I waited from the time I was 16 and started working and paying into Social Security until I turned 65. That's many years to wait to get Social Security and look forward to it.
As a society, we need to take care of our fellow citizens. And as people reach the age or the condition where they're no longer able to contribute to the workforce, I think that we as a whole need to take care of all of our citizens.
Nations that don't take care of their elderly and young people are, I think they're cruel. People need to be able to live, not just exist.
If the big guys at the top could just understand what a lot of us go through, maybe they wouldn't be so harsh in jumping to cut benefits and that type of thing. I really hope Congress does not have the mentality that they think they are so great that that's not needed, that they can mess with people and their earnings, that they something they paid into, that they deserve every bit of it and more.
At any time, Congress can pass something that's going to decrease my benefits. It can decrease other people's benefits. I think that if they're going to mess with it, make it better. Don't make it worse.
I think Congress should make sure that Social Security is available for future generations.
Well, this mic is quite high for a small person. Good evening. Good evening. Oh, come on, folks. We're at a party. Good evening. Good evening. It's wonderful to be among so many of my favorite people. A quick round of applause and thank you to AARP for that wonderful video. So for anyone I don't have the pleasure to know, my name is Rebecca Vallis. I have the privilege of serving as the CEO of the National Academy of Social Insurance. And on behalf of the Academy, welcome to the first of what will be, I'm sure, a month of many commemorations of Social Security's 90th anniversary. And it's just a true privilege to be among so many champions of social insurance tonight. It also feels incredibly important at this moment in particular to gather in community, to be in community, to reflect, yes, to celebrate, and also to recommit to the work that brought each of us into this field. 90 years ago, in the midst of the Great Depression, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed the Social Security Act, which, thanks to the National Archives, we have a copy of on display over here, if you haven't made your way over to that side of the room, into law. And that's thanks, I should also note, in no small part to the visionary leadership of Francis Perkins, who many of us are huge fans of as well. Yes. And I want to begin by inviting us to all just take a moment to let the weight and the wonder of that milestone that we are marking tonight to settle in. Because tonight we are not just celebrating a policy or a government program, we are honoring a promise. A promise that we, the American people, made to one another 90 years ago, that in a nation as wealthy as ours, no one should be left to face poverty or material hardship because they are too old to work, or because of disability, or the death of a parent or a spouse. Social Security was a radical act of moral imagination when it was signed into law in 1935, part of the New Deal's bold, values-based vision to reshape the American social contract, which for many of us younger than Social Security, sometimes it can be a little easy to take for granted. And it was born not just of political will, but of spiritual will, as a commitment to the idea that our government can and should serve as a tool for collective care. Before Social Security, half of older Americans lived in poverty. We'll hear more about this throughout the discussion tonight, reflecting on and remembering life before Social Security. Life then, for many, was a patchwork of charity, poor houses, dependence on family members if people were so lucky to have family. Older people, widows, people with disabilities, orphans were largely left out of the economy, pushed to the margins of society. And yet today, because of Social Security, millions and millions of people are able to keep a roof over their heads, food on the table, medicine in the cabinet, and the lights on. Because of Social Security, tens of millions of Americans have a measure of economic security, of peace of mind, and the dignity that we all deserve. So that's part of why we're here, a big part of why we're here to celebrate tonight, because we have made enormous progress, and we should celebrate that. But we must also, as we celebrate, as we commemorate, face this moment with clear eyes. Because just as in 1935, we find ourselves again nearing a crossroads, a time of profound moral and political choice, as we near another moment when Congress will need to act to preserve and secure that promise, the very foundation of the American social contract. And just as important as securing Social Security's finances, I think we can all agree, is recommitting to the public institution itself, the Social Security Administration, which has faced no shortage of challenges in recent months. The people who dedicate their lives to delivering on Social Security's promises, many of whom are with us this evening, deserve our deepest appreciation, respect, and support. And I want to take a moment to thank all the public servants in the room at a moment where public service is especially challenging. At the Academy, we often speak about the founder Bob Ball's vision. He was a visionary public servant who helped to shape the very system that we celebrate tonight. Bob Ball understood that Social Security was not just a government program. He understood that it's a covenant, an intergenerational promise rooted in dignity, in compassion, in collective responsibility. He thought of it, and I think of it, and many in this room understand it as a structure of care, built not just from laws and regulations, but from our highest values as a society, those that bind us not only as citizens, but as human beings. And that spirit is carried forward by the Academy's members. And I want to take a moment to give a round of applause to all of the folks in the room who are members of the National Academy of Social Insurance. many of whom in this room were with the Academy from the very beginning. I see lots of founding members around the room with Bob Ball when this organization was founded. Thank you for being, as I think of the Academy's member community, the conscience and the collective memory of this important field. Now is not the time, as I'm sure we are about to hear from Congressman Larson, to shrink from the challenges that Social Security faces. It's time to remember we're each part of a relay, and this right now is our leg of that race. So in that spirit, our hope at the Academy for tonight is that this moment be a moment that fills our cups, that reconnects us to each other, and to the deep well of purpose that brought each of us here to this work. We hope for tonight to be a moment that inspires us to redream the vision of the social contract that Social Security began all those 90 years ago, one rooted in solidarity and compassion and interconnectedness. We have come so far in 90 years, and as we all know very well, the work continues. So with that, we'll kick off the night by saying happy 90th birthday, Social Security, and a big thank you to everyone in this room and many of those not in this room who do this work for everything you do to carry that promise forward. And because I'm beginning on a note of gratitude, and that's where we need to start, I also want to take a brief moment to thank our wonderful board. If you're on the board, please raise your hand. Round of applause for the Academy's board members. I also want to take a moment to thank our wonderful event planning committee who I put to hard work for tonight's event and other things you're not seeing too. Judy Chesser, Nancy Altman, round of applause please, Bob Blancato, Brian Coyne, Jason Fichtner, Jim Roosevelt. I also want to say a special thanks to the Roosevelt Institute for being our partners tonight and for help making the party part of this possible. Thank you, Roosevelt. And then finally, a special thanks to our wine sponsors for the evening for generously providing their amazing wines to help us celebrate this milestone. So please join me in thanking Michael Shaps, Pippin Hill, Revelation, and the winery at Sunshine Ridge Farm. And of course, if you're an Academy member or you've come to any of our events, you know I have to thank my wonderful husband, who serves as the Academy's Somm in residence and who worked with our wine sponsors to make the wines possible. So Phil, where are you? There he is. All right, wave a hand. Thank you, Phil. So with all the gratitude out of the way, although it's going to continue throughout the evening, it is now my deep, deep, deep pleasure and honor to introduce someone whose career has been dedicated to strengthening and stewarding Social Security, a very special guest who we are deeply honored to have with us this evening. And honestly, he needs no introduction with that community, this community in this room, and that's Congressman John Larson.
Well, thank you, Rebecca. I can tell this is my kind of crowd when we start toasting, you know, what did you call your husband, a Fichtner, or at any rate? Oh, yes, that's exactly right. But I'm honored to be here. And as Rebecca said, I want to thank the Academy for your continued work and dedication, and the panels that you've assembled tonight. To have Mr. Roosevelt here, the genius of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. When you think back to 1929 and the great crash, and then the passage of Social Security in 1935, the courage that took, the vision, and to have a system in place, arguably, I think as Commissioner O'Malley knows, the best social insurance program in the world. Rich Neal said that today at a meeting with Speaker Jeffries, where we talked about the upcoming 90th anniversary of Social Security, not just in the form of celebrating and what we were going to do throughout our congressional districts, but for also recognizing the responsibility of the United States Congress to step up and do what hasn't happened in more than 54 years, not just to protect Social Security, but to expand it so it serves the very people that Franklin Delano Roosevelt had in mind, that keeps and binds our nation together. I often chide our Republican colleagues and say to them, why aren't you looking at this as an economic development plan? And they go, what? I said, you heard me. An economic development plan. I provide every one of them with a little card. And that card tells them how many people in their district receive Social Security benefits, how many get disability benefits, how many get spousal, dependent children, widows, and of course, pension checks. But the key thing is that in the 435 districts, on average, Social Security provides more than $200 million monthly to every congressional district. Now, where do those individuals spend that money? They spend it right back in the communities that they live in. And what has Congress done? Nothing. The last time Social Security was enhanced was 1971. Richard Nixon was president of the United States, but he learned from President Kennedy and Johnson, and frankly from President Eisenhower as well, in terms of what was needed and why this is such an important, very safety net of capitalism and entrepreneurialism and open markets. It allows people to take risk and also know that if for any reason they should fail, theirs or otherwise, the people that work with them and they themselves had a safety net, had the ability to survive and continue, that has never missed a payment. Never missed a payment. Not a pension payment, not a child support, not a widow's support, spousal, or disability payment. But it's appalling that Congress hasn't taken any action to enhance Social Security since 1971. Now, I know a few of you might be saying, well, wait a minute, don't forget 1982 and Nancy Altman's great efforts and what happened with the committee. I said, well, yes, they did save Social Security. And Tip O'Neill deserves great credit. So does Bob Dole, as a matter of fact. Remember, Ronald Reagan wanted to privatize it. But they came up with a plan, and the plan extended the solvency of Social Security. And you remember how they did it. They raised the age. Now, that may seem to some like that's a cogent, practical way to deal with this, and especially today when people say, you know, people are living longer. But everybody at this academy knows that for every year you raise the age, that's a 7% cut in your benefits. So what our erstwhile colleagues are talking about with a raising the age to 70 is a 21% cut in benefits. That is simply unacceptable, especially when you look at what this provides and the fact that we haven't made a change. Nobody, and everyone in this room can attest, this gets wealthy on Social Security, yet it is the basic economic foundation that keeps this very system of free markets, entrepreneurial and capitalism alive, because it does allow people to take risk, and it does provide for people. And imagine, and you all know the numbers, over 70 million people depend on Social Security. 10,000 baby boomers a day are becoming eligible for Social Security. 40% of all that 70,000, this is the only benefit that they have. And for Congress not to act in over 50 years, our new bill will require that Congress acts every 6 years to make sure that in the term of a senator and 3 of a House member, there will be no excuse to kick the can down the road, but to address the basic needs of the American people and capitalism. I'm encouraged by the leadership of Hakeem Jeffries. And so how out front, I'm sure most of you were up at 4 o'clock in the morning to hear his speech, and where he was able to go on for 8 hours. But in talking about Medicare and Medicaid, but also focusing on Social Security, he recognizes, and so do all of you, that it's long overdue, not just to protect, but to expand these benefits. You all know how solid that trust fund is. You also know and understand and why your voices, and especially here at this academy, are important. Privatization is going on right before our very eyes. And to look the other way is not acceptable. To be blinded to what's going on and the dismantling internally of the Social Security Administration, and to say that we're going to come in and we're going to turn this around with AI technology is a farce. Yes, there's great potential, and yes, nobody will deny that technology, and we can always improve and upgrade. But this is about fellow human beings who need to know, whether at the end of a phone call or face-to-face, there's a human being there that can help you through this process and help you understand what these benefits mean and how they can negotiate their way through it. For the 90th birthday, there'll be many celebrations, and we're pleased to join with the AARP. We're pleased to join with Nancy Altman. We're pleased to join with Max Richmond and the National Committee and everyone that's participating, and every member will be encouraged, Democrat and Republican. But I can guarantee you that every Democrat will be in their districts affiliating and associating, and not just cutting a birthday cake or anniversary cake or blowing out candles, but saying at the end of that, it's time for action. It's time to get motivated and pass a bill that doesn't simply protect, but expands the benefits of Social Security, so that people can live out their lives in dignity as Franklin Delano Roosevelt intended. God bless you. God bless America. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
I do what I'm told when photographers tell you to stop where you are. Vinny, you have a lot of power tonight. Thank you so much again, Congressman Larson, for your leadership, for your call to action. And I think everybody in this room, whatever political persuasion or ideological point in the spectrum they may come from, probably agrees that we are at the point where Congress does need to act, right? And that's a really important moment that we find ourselves in as a community, where that moment for action is here. So we have a great lineup for you tonight to continue these reflections and to continue thinking about the moment we find ourselves in as we mark 90 years of Social Security. So we are incredibly honored to continue the conversation with a very special conversation that I'm going to ask our participants in to join me on stage for. And as I do that, I'm just going to say a little housekeeping note for the evening. The bars are staying open throughout our program. The food is staying out. So if you'd like to get up and get yourself a drink, if you'd like to refresh your plate, make sure you're taken care of, please do that. That's the thing I like to do when I'm at events, and that's intentional, that we are leaving everything going for this evening. So please take care of yourselves and enjoy. So it is hard to imagine a more fitting way to mark Social Security's 90th anniversary than by hearing from someone whose family legacy is so deeply entwined with the program's origins and with the bold vision of economic security and shared responsibility that gave rise to Social Security. And that is, of course, Jim Roosevelt, the grandson of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He has spent his career advancing that legacy as a longtime public servant, healthcare leader, and as a member, we are very proud to say, of the National Academy of Social Insurance. And it was an honor to join him and 3 generations of the Roosevelt family earlier today for a really beautiful wreath-laying ceremony at the FDR Memorial. Thank you so much for being with us for that today, Jim.
It was great.
It was great. And your grandson is adorable. Liam is wonderful.
And he had the best line of the afternoon. You know what the weather was like this afternoon. It was a wonderful ceremony, beautiful talks, and then a beautiful wreath laying, which he helped with. But about 20 minutes into it, he said, "Wouldn't it be smarter to do this in the shade?"
And we all thought, Liam is all of us today as the sweat dripped down, but a brilliant grandchild.
He's 5.
He's 5, but he knew. And I am absolutely thrilled that guiding this conversation is another powerhouse in this field, someone I am very honored to have as a board member at the Academy and as a friend, and that is Deb Whitman, who also needs no introduction with this community as the Chief Public Policy Officer at AARP, and her leadership has shaped so much of Social Security over the years. So with that, please join me in welcoming Jim and Deb. And Deb, I'm going to hand it to you.
All right, Jim, I'm excited to chat with you.
I'm going to have some fun. And you'll all enjoy it a lot more if you do get another drink, actually.
Yeah. Hey, I kind of like, a conference where people can have a drink. There's so few of those these days, and particularly we need it. So I'm going to start with kind of the basics, going back to your grandfather. This is 90 years of his legacy. What do you think he would make of the fact that we are here celebrating a program that he started so long ago?
Well, of course, first of all, I have to point out, this is deduction from what I've read and been told by my parents and my grandmother, because he passed away shortly before I was born. So this is not firsthand scoop. On the other hand, I did get to know my grandmother. She lived till I was a senior in high school, which was a wonderful privilege for me. And I got to spend time with her and learn from her and my mother and father the importance of the sorts of thing that all of us here do today, and that members of Congress like Mr. Larson does for this country. I believe, though, based on what I learned from them and from what I have read, he would be actually, on the one hand, concerned about the assaults on Social Security, but he would be thrilled on where it has gone. I try to talk to a range of people with a range of points of view, and I do hear I do have some right-wing friends say, what would your grandfather think of how Social Security is today? And I enjoy saying back, he'd be thrilled. He would be very happy to see how Social Security was, as Mr. Larson mentioned, expanded over the years. And he would speak to the importance of, as the economy has changed, updating Social Security to expand it further. There's a voice we haven't mentioned yet. I've mentioned my grandmother, who had a big progressive influence on my grandfather, but also Frances Perkins, the Secretary of Labor in all 4 New Deal cabinets, the first woman ever in the cabinet, and then the longest serving person in a presidential cabinet. She actually was the intellectual spur behind what my grandfather did on many things, and in particular Social Security. I recently read a book called Dear Miss Perkins. There's a new biography of her out. It's good. Dear Miss Perkins is different. It's the personal stories of the people who would write to her, particularly to try to get asylum from Europe in the late 1930s. And the letters would all start, Dear Miss Perkins. So I got more of a feeling for how she approached the issues that she would bring to him. And she's a little bit lost in history. We don't hear that much about her. In fact, she was a very central figure, to the point that after she did some controversial things to move things along progressively, they had to kind of keep her out of the press for the last 2 terms, but they didn't keep her out of the cabinet. She kept on pushing. And he got to know her when he was governor of New York, she was Secretary of Labor of New York State, and then Secretary of Labor of the United States. And I see that relationship and the things that she put forward as indicative of what he would feel about Social Security today. He would want it to keep moving forward. I have one insight that I want to share, which is I have a document, a piece of paper that somebody gave me about 25 years ago, on which he made his original notes for Social Security. And it looked structurally very similar to what it looks like today, and actually more what it looks like today than it did at the beginning, because it includes health care. And that was something that Ms. Perkins insisted that he put in there. Then politically he couldn't do it. But it has the basic structure of equal contributions by employer and employee, and it has the structure of guaranteed payments. There is no means test in there, by the way. So for a long time, I kept that in a frame in my office. As we all go into the office less post-pandemic, I've been convinced to keep it in a safe deposit box. But
I feel like a dissertation could be written based on that one piece of paper.
I think it maybe could be.
Yeah, with the vision.
At any rate, that's the insight that I see, that the principles of Social Security that we live out and work off of today were there right from the beginning.
So I had the pleasure of working with you 26-ish years ago at the Social Security Administration, and I was a very junior staffer and helped to create the Retirement Research Consortium. And you came up to Boston, and I got to meet, and I was a little bit nervous, I have to say. I guess the idea of a Roosevelt working at Social Security was very powerful for me at a time, and I'm curious. Your grandfather started Social Security. Your father founded the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. You were working there. Was it like being in the family business? What was it like for you?
Well, I wouldn't quite call it the family business. It's all of our business. But But just want to pick up on one thing you just mentioned. The, I hope temporary, loss of the research consortium in this administration just drove a dagger through my heart.
It broke my heart too, I have to admit.
We were there at the beginning.
Yep.
And I've been in this room for many different occasions, but the annual August presentations of papers in this room, something I always find enlightening, something where I always learn a lot. And so to have that be attacked, much the same way that higher education is being attacked, is just devastating.
I stuck the August meeting just to make sure people would finish writing their papers every year. that was my little secret in there.
There you go. Yeah, great. So I think that my grandfather would have very much appreciated, again, under the tutelage of Miss Perkins, the importance of the intellectual foundation of Social Security and of social insurance benefits overall. When you mentioned you were a very junior staffer when we worked together, I was more senior in title, but I was learning about Social Security, things that you already knew. We had a great boss, Deputy Commissioner Jane Ross.
She was amazing.
Who, after my first year, said to me, when you became associate commissioner, I was wondering, can he do this? And I learned that a smart lawyer can learn to do things like this that they're not familiar with. Well, yeah, that's what I did that year. I learned from you and your colleagues, and I learned from Jane and others. And that has stood me in very good stead as Social Security has continued to be a central foundation of our compact with each other as Americans. And it has been for me an opportunity to both make the general point about our care for each other, and you can put that in biblical terms, you can put that in political terms, and it has permitted me to speak clearly based on the knowledge that I've gradually accumulated starting then about the specific concrete things that can be done to, as Congressman Larson said, enhance the program, but moreover, keep it on a solid footing.
Well, I seem to remember you were a secret weapon because anytime you went to a public event, just the love and compassion, I think, for the program and people being able to talk to you and say how much it meant was, we all knew that you were the secret weapon of SSA when you were there.
Well, that's kind of a funny story. I did a bit of speaking around the country, usually when the commissioner had a conflicting event. And they'd send me out to, cover. And then I found the communications people kept asking me more and more to do these events. I loved them. I still love speaking about Social Security. I just did a Social Security event in a small city in Massachusetts, Taunton, Massachusetts, that was having a special election. And of course, I kept it focused on policy, but the Democrat won the special election by 17 votes. It's great to be able to take substantive policy and get people to come and share their experiences, and that's what I really love doing.
So looking forward, how do we make sure that this program, which according to a recent AARP NACI survey is probably one of the most popular programs, and it has been for decades, how do we make sure it's here for the next 90 years?
Well, I saw that NACI survey, and I was pleased and encouraged, particularly because the mainstream media, I think, the sort of, on the one hand, on the other hand, reporting, I think gets taken in by the stories about, well, people under 40 don't think it will be there for them. That's half the story. They think it could be in danger, but they think it's the right thing. They think it's what should be there. They know that they are, and this was part of the structure that is in those notes that I saw, that I have in my office. They know that every working person in America makes their contribution and therefore has a right to this. It's not, as my grandfather would have did insist on, it is not the dole. It is an insurance program that they paid into, and people, including people under 40, know that. Then they sometimes say, but we're insecure about everything, and we are about that too. And that's the story they pick up. I don't think that's the real story out there.
So last question, how can we make sure that future generations, and I'm thinking of Liam, your grandson, who's 5, maybe we can't convince him yet because he's more worried about the heat or whatever, but how do we really make sure that there is a continuation of fighting for this program for future generations, because they are going to need it too? And so what's the message that we can share?
Well, I think we have to do what so many of us in this room does, each in our own way, whether it's studies, surveys, and so on that prove the point. We have to do even more of that. It's speaking out. It's speaking to forums or community meetings or local town committee meetings, getting the message out. We can't just assume, well, everybody knows that this is, as you know, they say back to the time of Eisenhower, the political third rail. They have to keep hearing it from us and then from the people who hear us, that you earned it, you deserve it, it works better than anything that was ever designed. I'm not saying it's a government program, actually. I ran the second largest health insurance company in New England. It works better than any of those. It works. We have to keep reminding people that that's not by chance. The law, the revenue level, and the ability to administer it well have to be focused on, have to be maintained. And if they are, it will not only be there for its 90th birthday, it'll be there for its 200th birthday.
All right, well, please join me in thanking Jim. Thank you for your public service, and thank you for today's conversation.
Well, thank you for everything that you do and that AARP does, and it's great to be here with you.
Thank you so much, Jim and Deb. Brief moment for photos. Thank you again, Jim and Deb, for grounding us in the history, in the legacy, and the enduring promise of Social Security. We're now going to continue tonight's conversation by bringing in 2 people who know the Social Security Administration inside and out. And they know it because they've each led the agency through pivotal chapters in its history. And a lot of the people in the room have worked with them, a lot of the people in the room have worked for them, and they've become one of my favorite bipartisan dynamics dynamic duos. And I have had a real pleasure working with both of them at different points in my career. And that's former Commissioner Martin O'Malley and former Commissioner Mike Astrue, two people who, again, need very little introduction in a room like this. But I'm really interested and excited to hear them reflect on the 90-year journey of this vital institution, especially given some of the challenges and opportunities facing the agency today. I want to note that we're very sad to miss former Commissioner Carolyn Colvin, who was going to join us this evening, who ended up with a health issue. She is okay, but she is sad to miss us, and she is here in spirit. And so I want to welcome our Commissioner dynamic duo up to the stage, as well as the person that we are thrilled to have with us to moderate this conversation, and that is Kathleen Romig, one of the leading experts on Social Security, an Academy member, and someone I'm honored to count a dear friend. So wherever they are lurking, if we could have Commissioner Astrue, Commissioner O'Malley, and Kathleen Romig join us. Come on up, girl. Take it away, Kathleen.
Good evening, everybody. I'm so excited to do this conversation because these are two of the people I most admire and two people that I had the pleasure of working for. Commissioner Astrue at the beginning of my career at the Social Security Administration, and Commissioner O'Malley at my most recent tour of duty at SSA. So this is going to be really fun. I'm very excited. I'd like to start with you, Commissioner O'Malley. One thing that you often talk about both within the agency and in public is the mission that we share, the mission of the Social Security Administration. And I'd like to hear more from you about what that mission is and what it means to you.
The mission we share. When I was asked to go to Social Security, I called my former United States Senator Barbara Mikulski, who fashioned herself the guardian angel of Social Security. I'm sure she called you several times. Bet you always took those calls, as I do. But she said, you know, the greatest asset you're going to have there is the commitment of the people that work at Social Security. And it is that mission that I think has kept people there even through the brutality of these last 6 months. If people are still there after being treated as they've been treated these last 6 months, it's because of the mission that they share. And I'd submit, Jim, it's the mission that your grandfather called forward 90 years ago. And it is a belief that we're all in this together, that we need each other, and that we have to help each other if we are to succeed. And that the greatness of our country isn't measured by the amount of wealth we accumulate or the size of our armies. It's measured by the compassion and the care that we demonstrate for one another, to feed the hungry, to heal the sick, to care for widows and for orphans. That's the mission of this agency. There is not a single person in that agency who believes, as Elon Musk does and has said, that empathy is the greatest weakness in the Western mind. The folks that work at Social Security, the people that care about it, share a much higher mission, not that sort of depraved view of what our society is and can and should be.
Thank you for that. You know, you mentioned the last 6 months, which have been the most tumultuous period in Social Security Administration history. They're right now undergoing a radical restructuring, and thousands of staff have departed the agency, including many of its senior leaders. And so I'm wondering, as two of the people who have led the agency, you know, under both Democrats and Republicans, what do you think of how SSA is doing at age 90 now? And I'd like to start with you, Commissioner Astrue.
Well, clearly it's a time of enormous stress and unexpected stress because the agency largely has been able to avoid these kinds of issues in the past. And I think one of the important things that everybody in this room needs to think about is how do we do things differently in order to try to protect the agency, because I think there's a tendency to want to repeat what was successful in the past. And that just doesn't work. Our politics is very different. This hit me. I kind of unexpectedly did a week of door-to-door campaigning for a candidate 10 years ago, and it was so different than before. What struck me was nobody was thinking about issues, nobody was thinking about character of the candidates. They were all thinking which candidate best channeled my rage. And it hit me very, very hard, because it's nothing I expected to ever see. And I think that now, in this time period, we need to find some themes that can try to bring people together. It will be harder to bring people together on all parts of the spectrum than it ever has been before, but I think we need to try. And I think there are issues like transparency that cut across party lines, or should cut across party lines. And I think, quite frankly, the record of the agency in the last 50, both parties, has been pretty terrible. And it's probably the worst now that it's ever been. And I saw a quote recently about, well, we don't want to be transparent because that upsets people, and then more people, get in line or make phone calls and stuff. And I really wanted to pull out what little hair I have left. And that's something that I think people can work together in a bipartisan way. And I think it's something that you can get Congress behind, because at least the more responsible people want to know what's going on. And you can't now. And you can't even, and I've had this issue 6-8 years now, on those occasions when I'm trying to write a piece on Social Security, I can't find the information I need on the website, and you can't call into the agency, even as a former commissioner, and get what you need. And that's disgraceful, absolutely disgraceful. So something that I think we can all get behind is more transparency. I think we can get behind, I think as Martin was saying, issues related to the workforce. And on the Hill, I mean, part of the hook there, and I think my bride taught me a lot about this, because she did constituent work for a Democratic congressman when we were first out of college and married, is that they're wonderful people in these congressional offices that spend a lot of time on congressional work and are very close to the people in the agency who help people. And that, I think, can cut across party lines. And reminding people in Congress, in particular, how valuable an asset we have in the people at Social Security, and the kind of Elon Musk comment comparing them to people that work at the Registry of Motor Vehicles is horribly unfair, and something that we've got to turn around. So there are some issues out there that I think we should rethink. I think we should rethink some of the debate about solvency, and I was having a polite disagreement with somebody about this in the green room not too long ago. But I think Congress is so dysfunctional that the historic gold standard that the agency has promoted and others have promoted of 75 years of solvency as what you have to aim for if you're going to open up solvency. I personally have come to doubt that Congress has the ability to do that. And I've moved toward the kind of view that I had when I was working primarily in healthcare, that you've got to be thinking more incrementally. And I think if you could, for instance, add 20 years to solvency so that people who are the age of my children have more confidence in the agency, I think that would be an important down payment to a process where we'd have to revisit solvency more and more frequently. Anyway, I'll stop there.
I thought it was interesting that you brought up transparency, because in my conversations with each of you, it's often struck me that you're kindred spirits, and I know that was something that was so important to Commissioner O'Malley too, transparency, and particularly transparency about customer service in order to drive improvements in customer service. So Commissioner O'Malley, I'd like you to talk more about, how you think the agency is doing on, all of that, transparency, customer service, and where it might go.
Sure. Well, I can tell you that, and I can really only speak, Commissioner, to the last year. I kind of went into the fourth quarter of that ball game. But I found an agency that had a long culture of collecting a lot of data on a lot of things, sometimes double checking it 3 times, which I guess is 6 times checking it. But it was an agency, is an agency that prides itself on getting the numbers right. That's part of their culture. But they were also part of the history of democracies, which says that leaders should not share data openly and transparently. That's not just related to the federal government, that's the state, that's the city, because if you do, one of your opponents will cherry pick something that's embarrassing to you and throw it back at you. I was tipped long ago by people much smarter than I am, that actually in the information age, when people can know all the information at the same time, that you have to be open and transparent, that's the opening ante in this new game of trust. And without trust, there is no progress. And so Senator Cassidy actually asked me in the confirmation hearing, and the agency was very disciplined about not letting me talk to anyone in the agency before the confirmation hearing. Apparently that rule's out the window too. Yeah. But I knew enough from talking to Carolyn Colvin, who I spoke to on the phone the other day, by the way. Her spirit's still good. She's sorry she can't be here. I'll let her know on the way home how things went. But Senator Cassidy asked me, how quickly, we hear things about the agency. People claim that they're waiting longer for things. And the White House said, look, full disclosure, they've been 10 years heading to a 50-year low in staffing, and they've had the lowest morale in the last 3 years. So Senator Cassidy said, how quickly can you turn around the metrics of timeliness of service delivery, and what you and I learned and understood to be a big insurance company, not a payment center or an ATM. And he said, how quickly can you turn those around so not only we in the Senate can see them, but so the entire American people can see, not only on a year-to-date basis how you're doing, but the last 7-year trend. And I said to him, 60 days. And he scoffed and said, 60 days, okay, we'll hold you to that. And we were able to get it out in 60 days. OMB took another 30 days to change the color scheme on what we wanted to print, but we had it out in 60 days. No offense if anybody's here from OMB. I guess the point of that story is this. When you create a winnable game and there's actually integrity to the measures, people rise to the occasion. Even little kids play soccer differently when you're keeping score. And we also knew that in order to get more adequate funding, that we needed to let Congress see, and our overlords at OMB see, the issues we were wrestling with. So at Security Stat, 8 times a week, we opened up not only to the entire senior executive service, so they could virtually observe how we wrestled with those conversations in the round in an agile every 2 week, but we also opened them to both parties of Congress and their staff people. I think we were onto something. And the fact that those folks, without any new staff, sprinted up that escalator and turned around almost every metric. We weren't able to turn around yet the processing center backlog, but they got each one of the other ones moving in the right direction. So it really is about openness and transparency. The cuts that they've made now, paying people our money to quit the agency, cutting the IT staffing by 50% or 40% or whatever the hell it is. I don't know anymore because it's become like the hermit kingdom, and the numbers that you publish, you don't even know if they're the right numbers. You find out from people that escaped over the 38th parallel what's been going on in the agency since you left. But I do think we were onto something, and we can get back to it. And if that year it taught us nothing else as citizens, capital C, it is that our federal government actually can work and can be made to work better. I think that's what Mike believed, that's what I believed, and that's what we both tried to do during our time there. I love the voice of that guy in the AARP video who said, if you're going to mess with it to make it better, not to make it worse.
Let me just second what Martin's saying. And again, when I got to the agency, OMB, to their credit, was pushing transparency, and they did a good job with us. But we went way beyond what they did. But the most important thing we did that was a great frustration to me when we started is the agency had become so siloed that the agency was reporting what appeared to be the same data elements in 3 or 4 different ways, depending on which part of the agency, which deputy commissioner's branch was reporting. And so David Foster, God bless him, spent 6 months making himself unpopular, pushing to get a consolidated, singular definition for each of this. So because we were getting negative feedback from Congress, we were giving Congress inconsistent numbers on things. And I do also agree with Martin. I think that the numbers are going to hell in a handbasket. And one of the things that a group like this can push for is to try to make sure that those numbers are honest and accurate and upfront so that we can have an intelligent debate. Because unless we can all really agree on the numbers, we can't have a principled debate.
Commissioner O'Malley mentioned morale at SSA, and I know that it was important to each of you to make sure that the workforce was motivated and productive. I know that these last 6 months or so have been so difficult to the staff at SSA, whom you really work to take such good care of. Would each of you like to say something to the current staff at SSA, in this moment, starting with Commissioner Astrue?
Well, I guess I would start by saying something very hard, which is, we need you to hang in there. And that's, in a difficult situation, it's always hard to ask people to do that. But it's more important than ever, and particularly when you look at the losses at the top of the hierarchy. I mean, I don't think the agency has, last 40 years has done a great job in sort of training the SES, and they got away from a lot of the things that the SES was supposed to be about and tends to fall back to just promotion and grade. And I've been thinking about it now. I mean, how do you get people to sign up for the SES? Do they have the people that can even train an SES? And all that is very hard. And so I would say, it's easy to stay when times are good. If you really care about the agency and you're good at what you do, it's more important than ever that you stay.
I'm in awe of the courage of the people that have stayed. I mean, a lot of the systems people who left thought there'd be an interruption in benefits already. That is a real tribute to those that did remain. I mean, I know some of them probably, they probably looked at what was best for their family, as we all must. And but the fact that they've kept things going is just, I'm in awe of their courage and their commitment. And I see, I don't know, we neither of us will admit to ever reading the Charles T. Hall blog. But when I read every morning the Charles T. Hall blog, I mean, I see the streams and I see people saying, through all of their frustration, we just want to be able to do our job. Don't tell us that you're finally going to give us bonuses or pat us on the back or cut a birthday cake. Give us the people we need to do our job. And when I visited Social Security offices all over the country, as I'm sure you did as well, Mike. You really learn a lot talking to your fellow Americans. You also learn how little you know about the program that you're in charge of leading. I wasn't in 30 seconds into a conversation where I wasn't putting up a finger and asking for somebody from the agency to help me out with a question. But when people, as they frequently would, complained about the length of time it took them to get something done, I would share with them, I would first of all say, I'm sorry. I said, they're really good people that work here, but their staffing has been reduced to a 50-year low, even as baby boomers of my generation swell their ranks every day to a new all-time high. To a person in so-called red and so-called blue areas, people would always say they should let them have the staff they need to serve us. So the good news about, there's not really good news for the trauma that the agency has suffered. I salute those who have stayed and keep it going because people's lives depend on it. But the good news is, in the longer arc of history, this is the most popular program in America. And it is one of the few programs and missions that where 80% of Americans, regardless of party, believe we should make it stronger and better and secure it for the future. Not dismantle it, not whack and hack it, not take a chainsaw to it, not pay people our money to leave. So that's the good news, is that the American people treasure this agency and want it to be there for them and their grandkids for the long haul.
Yeah, I think there's a lack of appreciation about what an important resource the employees are. I mean, I've thought about this many times. I mean, I never thought I would be Social Security Commissioner. When I worked for Commissioner Hardy, occasionally I would think about what it would be like, but it was always sort of like coming out of the bullpen for the Red Sox or something. So, so when you actually start, it's really overwhelming, and a lot of things to get on top of. A lot of people do, and I thought it was very important to get out though and talk to people in the field. And it is very hard for the rank and file to talk to a commissioner because they're worried that they'll make a bad impression with their supervisor or something else, or they're just intimidated and that kind of thing. And one of the frustrations for me, because I've wanted to thank this person because she saved my first year, that I can't even, not only do I not remember her name, I don't even remember what field office I was in because it was such a blur, but she stood up in the question time and said, how come we are still requiring everybody who's retiring to come in with their birth certificate? Other agencies are using other data we have to verify these kind of things. Why can't we do that with our own data? And I guess, you know, the briefings I had gotten before had been pretty superficial, and I just honestly said, I don't know the answer to that question, but I will go back and ask. And I think she probably thought I was kind of not terribly serious about that, but I did. And there was initial kind of, but then I pressed on it, and it turned out we really did need to make that change, and that saved like 15 minutes on every retirement application that year. In a year where Congress didn't pass a budget till almost near the end of the year, there was no new money, and we were getting incredible pressure on the hearings backlogs. So having that one person to have the knowledge, the intelligence, and the courage to say, this is what we ought to be doing, saved the whole agency, you know, for a year or two. And, you know, I hear the Doge boys talking, and I want to scream about the disrespect to the employees and the lack of appreciation for what an asset they are.
Hear, hear.
Commissioner Astrue, you were known as the tech commissioner, bringing in a lot of the technology that now the agency has really built upon, and you know your successors have built upon, and that we all use now. And I'm curious, each of you, as there's a lot of talk now about further tech modernization at SSA, what do you think it would take to have a successful modernization of the technological tools that SSA uses to serve the public?
Well, first of all, I should confess that I married up a much smarter person than I am and more tech. So the first time we were at an event and someone came up and said, I'm so grateful we finally have a technology commissioner, my wife literally snorted her drink out to her nose because she's the one that's had to help me with my computer and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So, you know, technology is a great thing, and if it's used properly as a tool, it can, you know, protect people's lives, do great things. One of the several things that I'm very proud of on my watch was the Compassion Allowance Program, and Diane Braunstein over there was the one that got it up and running in record time. And that was only possible because of advances in technology. Diane and I had the first conversation about trying to do this in 1985 when she was working as a detail lead for me in Secretary Heckler's office. And she explained to me, you know, with a paper process, you just can't pull these cases out and deal with them because it's just going to slow down everybody and slow down the people. And it was important to me when I realized that with the technology in the agency, you could pull people out efficiently if you could identify them, and you could start to give benefits, generally on my watch, within 5 to 7 days, but sometimes within 24 hours. And there's still a lot more that needs to be done, particularly in the back office operations. I ran out of time and money on those things. What worries me right now is you have a feeling with the Doge folks that they're very into the idea that AI is going to replace human beings. And I have two concerns about that, at least two concerns about that. One is AI is nowhere near to being anywhere close to be able to deal with the complexity and subtlety of so many of the decisions that have to be made. And they can't get it right. And then the darn machines will probably be hallucinating before too long, you know, as well. But I'll just leave it at that. I don't think it can do it well. I think it will be expensive to try to do. And when they do it, you'll be eliminating a lot of human beings, and then your ability to go back and try to fix it is going to be, you know, limited. I mean, where we are now, if you had a commissioner who was determined to fix the damage that's been done so far this year, and Congress was willing to support that, which are two big ifs, you could do it. We'd probably would have lost money overall, but you could do it. At some point, though, when you lose too many of the people that understand how things are done, you can't go back and fix it. And I'm very concerned about you know, the attempt to use AI to substitute for people on the front line. I think the primary role for AI should be those back office operations that I never had the time and money to get to. Those are very susceptible to AI. I once made a surprise visit to one of these processing centers where they didn't even notice I was there for about an hour. And you know, we had all these bins and loaded with binders and stuff, and I went through them to try to just figure out, what is this work that nobody tells me about in operations? What's here? You know, what could we do, you know, more efficiently? And again, we never really could do that, but there's a lot of those arcane overlapping cases and these kinds of things where you could probably use AI to sort those out and at least be a guide to work that even the employees find difficult. So I'm not against AI generally, but the notion that we're going to have this full-scale substitution, it just really frightens me.
And Commissioner O'Malley, I know the tech modernization that happened in your term was very customer-centered transformation, and I'm curious, you know, what you think it takes to modernize.
Yeah, we had three big priorities at the beginning of the year, and we pretty much got everybody together and in an every 2-week cadence attacked those three, and each of them had some aspect of technology to them. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to turn any of them around. The key part of it was being honest about the data so we could analyze the problem and figure out whether the things we were trying were working or not. One of them was the backlog in disability determinations, huge backlog in initial disability determinations. We did a number of policy things many of you advocated for, including the 5-year, you know, past relevant work rule, collateral estoppel, and other things. And around about mid-year in the calendar year, we got, I think it reached the all-time high of 1.2 million, and we were able to work that down. And I believe it's still on momentum, continuing to go down. The other big one was the 100% clawback, which sadly they reversed. We got, you know, you talk about asking questions, Mike. I asked, why do we intercept 100% of that? And the immediate response was statutory. But once we looked deeper, they came back, the next day and said, it wasn't statutory. I said, is it 10 Commandments or amendment to the Constitution, or what was it? And they said, no, it's POMS, it's sub-regulatory. Sadly, they reversed that as soon as they came in, and then I guess they got blowback from Republican members of Congress, so they've gone to 50%. Why? I don't really know. But the other one was the 1-800 number. And we had been fraught with a really bad phone system, and in fairness to the agency, I mean, pandemic hit and everything went upside down. Verizon saddled us with a clunky system. The agency, though, in a very short sprint, in a matter of about 60 days, once we decided it was go time, and we cut over to AWS Connect, and it was a whole new system. It's given the agency a lot more capacity, and we had the modernization plan in place. We're starting to roll out the field offices. So it shows that the agency actually can do big IT projects, do them well. And the reason it went so well is that on August 22nd, there wasn't a single article written about it. When we cut over, they never report on the planes that land safely at Dulles. And so we cut over the largest load in the federal government, and they did it flawlessly. If you want to know what the roadmap is for modernization, do as Mike Astrue did, do as I did. Listen to the people that have to wrestle with the clunky systems every day. They'll tell you what needs to be fixed. But as Congress level funded them, and they had to absorb $600 million in fixed cost, in an agency that's 85% staff and 15% IT, staff gets attrited down and IT projects modernization gets pushed out. And we need to stop that. If we went back to funding Social Security at the 1.2% when they provided a high level of customer service more than 10 years ago, you could take all of that out of the trust fund between now and 2033 and would only advance the depletion date in the surplus reserve by 30 days. 30 days. Steve Goss is here. He scored that for me. It's 30 days. So why are we not giving Social Security, especially since it wouldn't add anything to the debt or the deficit if you took it out of the trust fund? They've dipped in to take so much more money out of the trust fund, restore people's customer service, and modernize their IT. They can do it. If they haven't done away with the museum at the agency, you used to see like Harry Reasoner and other people. Anybody remember Harry Reasoner? Yeah, Tom Brokaw. Talking about, on the clips there about how Social Security is a leader. They're now using a new computer system. They can do that again. The people that work there in IT are there because of the mission. They're not there because they don't have other options. They don't, wallow in green screens and COBOL because they're stupid. It's because Congress hasn't allowed them to spend on IT modernization. So they can, they should. There's a roadmap for it. But it's not destruction in AI.
Well, I think this has been so much fun, but I'm afraid we have run out of time. It is a real pleasure, and thank you both of you for being here, and looking forward to working together with you on the next 10, 20, and who knows how many more years of Social Security together.
90.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank these guys again. This was a great conversation. Thank you, Kathleen, Commissioner Astrue, Commissioner O'Malley. I just a brief little interlude to say, as this commissioner dynamic duo, this bipartisan dynamic duo has started to do a little bit of a roadshow. A side note in terms of things the Academy is especially excited about, we have a little announcement tonight, which will be shared with our members very soon, so you're going to hear it here first, but we are very excited that the winners of this year's Bob Ball Award are going to be Commissioner Astrue and Commissioner O'Malley. So, a lot of gratitude for their leadership standing up for this program and this agency at this critical time. Mark your calendars, October 22nd. Hope you don't have other plans. So as we move into our final panel of the evening, I'm just going to say, if you need a drink, if you need a little food, the bars are still open, the food is still there. Please do what you need to do to continue enjoying. But we are really looking forward to welcoming our final panel up to this stage, and I'm going to do a little bit of talking while they come join us. And so what we're going to be doing for this final panel of the evening is to reflect not just on the past 90 years of Social Security, but on the broader arc of history that brought us here and the road that lies ahead. When President Roosevelt signed the Social Security Act into law in 1935, he, as many people in this room will know, called it a cornerstone in a structure that is by no means complete. And so tonight, as we gather in that spirit, we honor the bold foundation that Social Security laid, but we also must acknowledge how much work still remains to realize the full promise of that structure, a society in which dignity, economic security, and care are guaranteed across the lifespan for all of us. And so I'm excited to get to put myself in the moderator's seat for this next conversation because it includes some of my very favorite people, and I think a group who maybe never has been on stage together, all in this formation. And it is 5 visionary leaders from across the field, each of whom brings a unique and vital perspective. Nancy Altman, again, with as many others on the stage tonight, needs no introduction with this crowd as a founding member of the Academy and as the longtime leader of Social Security Works. Elizabeth Wilkins is the executive director of the Roosevelt Institute, who we're so glad to have partnering with us on tonight's event. And I've been thrilled to see some of the incredible vision that Roosevelt, under her leadership, is bringing around economic thought grounded in equity and democracy and public power. Maria Town, whom I'm really thrilled to count a dear longtime friend, we were very young once together, is the president and CEO of the American Association of People with Disabilities. She is a force and a visionary leader in the disability rights movement. Jocelyn Frye, who I don't get to hang out with that much these days, but who we did spend some good time at the Center for American Progress, is the president of the National Partnership for Women and Families, where she leads with a fierce commitment to advancing equity at the intersection of gender and race and economic justice. And last but certainly not least, because we don't want to damage his ego, is Jason Fichtner, a senior fellow and board member whom we all love dearly at the National Academy of Social Insurance, and a former muckety-muck at the Social Security Administration in many different roles.
She does mean least.
Hardly. We love our Jason. And so together we're looking forward to looking back at the world before Social Security, and also looking forward. What does it mean in this moment to carry the legacy forward and finish the work that FDR and Francis Perkins started all those years ago? So I'm going to transition mics. Please join me in welcoming this amazing panel. Feel free to bring your drinks back to come and sit down, because this is going to be a good one, guys. We got some spicy people up here. So the kickoff question that I kind of want to throw to all of you, and Nancy, I'll give it to you first, is that 2025 doesn't just mark 90 years of the Social Security Act. As I mentioned, the law was part of the New Deal that really laid the groundwork for the social insurance system that many of us all work on, but also really the modern social contract that many people alive today really take for granted. So something you do often, and which I really appreciate how you do, is to help us remember what life looked like before Social Security and before the New Deal. What should we be reflecting on in terms of the successes and accomplishments 90 years later?
Yeah, we have a lot to be proud of. Social Security really did transform the nation. You've talked about it a bit in your introduction. At the time Social Security was enacted, every state but New Mexico had poorhouses. These were not places where, just people for their whole lives were poor went. They were mainly independent wage earners who at their end of their lives had no choice. It was mainly older people. People routinely worked as long as they could. When they couldn't keep working, they moved in with their adult children. That was just routine. But not everybody had children who could or would take them in, and they went to the poorhouse. Similarly, when a parent died, even though there was still another parent who was alive, children often were taken from the home because the one parent couldn't take care of them. And they were sometimes put with other relatives. Sometimes they were actually put in orphanages. People who became disabled were often had no choice but to simply beg that there was just no way to get by. And of course, that's all changed now. One of the things I love is, because I think it's a perfect metaphor, is the game of Monopoly. Everybody's played Monopoly. And it started actually in 1909. There used to be a spot on the Monopoly board in one of the corners that if you threw the wrong number, you wound up in the poorhouse. That same spot, picture the Monopoly board, that same spot is now free parking. So think of the perfect metaphor. We've gone to something we dread, to something we all want. And when you talk about the New Deal, a month before President Roosevelt signed the Social Security Act into law, he signed the National Labor Relations Act into law, which really gave, yes, and that gave workers the right to collectively bargain. And I dare say we would not be where we are today without organized labor.
Yeah, it's such an important point, and a lot of folks from the labor movement in the room. Elizabeth, anything you want to add to that, especially given the Roosevelt Institute's leadership around carrying forward that vision of the New Deal?
It is pretty fun to get to carry forward the legacy of the Roosevelt family, so it's a pretty awesome job. You know, I think one thing to remember, in addition to the economic precarity that people were living in this moment of total economic devastation and crisis, is that Roosevelt took office at a moment of democratic crisis as well. That this was a moment where people were truly looking at, and in fact, members of his administration went to fascist Italy to look around and say, wait, are we sure that democracy is the best system for delivering economic security for people? Maybe we should think about communism. Maybe we should think about fascism. Maybe Russia or Italy is better than us at this. That was the depth of kind of the despair around the whole economic American project that people were engaged in. And so the elements of the New Deal that restored economic security and agency, things not just the Social Security, the social safety net, but also the elements of the New Deal that allowed people to build power, the elements of the New Deal that constrained corporate power. All of those things didn't just restore economic security and opportunity to people. It restored people's faith that democracy and capitalism could coexist, and that this whole project could be engaged in perpetuity for the public good. And a huge portion of that was Social Security, and the notion that, yes, there were going to be vagaries in capitalism, there were going to be ups, there was going to be downs, but part of the bargain was there was only so much that we were going to allow individual people to suffer the consequences of that economic system. And without that bargain, people weren't sure that they wanted democracy to be their system of government. And so I think in particular at this moment that we're in, remembering that there is this key connection between economic security, national solidarity, and a belief and faith in democracy is totally important to remember and to carry forward.
I so appreciate you bringing that up, and a lot of nodding in the room right now, hitting that theme. Jocelyn, what do you want to add?
Well, I'll actually pick up where Elizabeth left off, because I think when I think back to the origins and where we started, I think the other root, in addition to sort of capitalism, is sort of this notion of who deserves help and who doesn't. And that baked into sort of pre-Social Security was sort of this notion that your life's course was entirely just dependent on your individual actions. And if you ended up in a place that was bad, it was sort of your fault. And so you just deserved what you got. And I think, Social Security helped to turn that concept a little bit on its head and said, there is a role for government. It's worth investing in people, and that there is a social contract, and you alluded to this at the beginning, that requires investment too, that it's not enough to sort of operate sort of survival of the fittest. Because the other piece of it is that our system was not built for everybody to be successful, right? Our system actually was built for some folks to benefit over other folks. And so that the notion of a social contract was also saying, as a role of government, we have to invest in all the people, not just a core portion of it. And so I think in this moment, as I reflect back on that history, I think we're at a similar moment, right? Like we've just been through a whole conversation about a bill that was rooted in premises that were inaccurate in order to rationalize mistreating folks on the theory that some deserve help and some don't, right? And I think what I most appreciate, not only about Social Security, but really the New Deal, is this understanding that we have to operate differently, that our people actually deserve more from government, and it's not just sort of a nice to do, but it actually is what government should be doing, and it's an important lesson in a moment where we seem to have lost that lesson.
Thank you for bringing that in, Jocelyn. Jason, I want to say not only are you not least, and in this lineup, not last right now.
Yeah, that's right.
But just a round of applause to Jason for holding it down as the only man on a panel of badass ladies.
I'm the diversity candidate, right?
And you do it well, and we knew you could handle this lineup. So, Jason, what are you reflecting on as we mark 90 years?
So, first of all, thanks for having me up here. It's hard to follow two distinguished ladies and then to be followed by one after. And so everyone knows we can't see you. I can see Deb and Jim, and that's it. So if they throw something, I'll see it coming, but if the rest of you do, I'm going to get hit. I think we reflect on this in the moment in time, and we've talked about the New Deal, what's changed, people who deserve it, what the social contract looks like, are very important fundamental pillars to understand and reflect on as we move forward with Social Security, with Medicare, with Medicaid, with potential child care, paid leave, whatever we're doing. But with Social Security, it's important to realize that this is a social insurance program. And I'm an economist, so I don't get invited to cocktail parties often because economists aren't liked. But insurance, by definition, is something you pay for a high cost but low probability event. You don't get insurance to pay for gas in your car or brakes. You get insurance in case your car is destroyed or stolen. When Social Security was started, it was a New Deal era coming out of the Depression, and it was a different time than we have now. And the insurance value was no one should be in poverty because of old age, and then we added disability. And that is the important fundamental to hold on to. And I was thinking about Congressman John Larson's comments about expanding Social Security, and I think that's going to fall on deaf ears for Republicans. But what would resonate is enhancing the insurance aspect of Social Security, because the insurance value is what is so important for Social Security, whether it's disability, old age. And what that means is you think about how you talk about enhancing Social Security. For those who might live longer, maybe there's a top-up to Social Security to help pay for long-term care because we can't afford long-term care insurance, but maybe we can do it as a top-up. How do we think about disability insurance for those who need it? And Steve Goss is here somewhere, and at some point we had changed our language at the Social Security Administration that at one point it was like 1 in 5 people might experience a disabling event in their lifetime, then it was 1 in 4. So just that realization that disability could be you is an important understanding of the insurance value of the program. And when I was the Deputy Commissioner of Social Security, I would be on an airplane and you're solo traveling, the person you're sitting next to always says, "What do you do?" I'm like, "Work for Social Security." And they say, "Oh, well, that's not gonna be there for me, is it? It's going bankrupt." Well, let me tell you a story. And then you talk about how it's the insurance value and it includes disability, and they have this whole new understanding about what the program actually means. And so I think we need to rethink what this means as an insurance program so that it fundamentally supports making sure no one is impoverished in poverty, but I'm also recognizing and very sensitive to people who are throwing out reform ideas about a flat benefit or something else that says, well, Social Security is going to be 80% replacement or more for those who are low income. But that means if you were fine with them being poor when they were working, you're fine with them being poor when they're retired, does not sit well with me. So we need to have a better understanding of what a meaningful minimum benefit is and what that means for the top end when we say we don't want to means test Social Security, because I do think when we think about the program, what's made it so valuable is that it's an earned benefit and it's a shared solidarity where we all pay into it, and that is something we all support. But you could still be taxed on the 1040, some benefits for higher income people, so they still get the same check every month, but it's taxed on the 1040, they don't realize it. So we should be more nuanced in thinking about what reforms might look like to enhance the insurance value of Social Security, but not make sure it's something that is a windfall program for those who don't need it or don't deserve it, but it can be the insurance value at any point in time when people do actually need it.
I think something might be coming at you that someone's thrown. Oh, no, just kidding. No, you've escaped this time. Just because he's been named a few times, and I just really want to give him some love that he deserves, can we give a round of applause to Steve Goss?
Somewhere. Where are you, Steve?
Steve, we can't see up here because of the lights, but there he is.
There he is.
All right. If you're looking for dark chocolate, find Steve after this panel. Just kidding, Steve. It's wonderful to see you in person. A lot of us really miss you. Karen Glenn is carrying forward the wonderful work at the Office of the Chief Actuary, and Karen Glenn deserves a shout out as well.
Someone who worked with Steve for a long time, Steve, I appreciate all the work you have done. I don't miss you. I'm kidding. That's a joke, you know.
I said this panel would be spicy. Oh dear. So Maria, bring us home on this first question. What are you reflecting on as we mark 90 years in terms of successes and accomplishments?
So I want to shift a little bit of what you said, which is that hopefully disability will be you, right? Not if, not when, but disability is a natural part of the human condition. It is a natural part of aging. And if you are becoming disabled, hopefully that means you've lived a long, good life. Aging should not be a privilege, and aging with dignity should not be a privilege. That needs to be said today, and it really needed to be said in 1934, right? And when I think about kind of the context of what the country was like before the Social Security Act, as is true for many programs still today, where you live played a huge role in what benefits you had access to, because states had this patchwork quilt kind of version of old age pension programs. And so an older adult in New Mexico might have a vastly different experience than an older adult in Illinois, and so forth and so forth and so on. And so one of the kind of wins that I'm reflecting on right now is the consistency that Social Security provided, that no matter where you are, if you contribute to the system, if you work hard enough, long enough, you will get this benefit. And I think about the people with disabilities today who, someone in Maryland has a vastly different experience than someone in Louisiana, my home state, with the Medicaid buy-in program, right? And because disabled people work so hard to get onto these programs and the benefits are not transferable, they cannot move, even if moving to another state would be more beneficial for them in the long run. There's no guarantee. Creating a program like Social Security not only gave people the confidence that no matter where they were, they would get the same benefit, they could move to their family who may have gone out west or back east or down south. You think about things like the Great Migration, right? They could move and not worry that those benefits would disappear. And we can't underestimate the importance of that.
I love and appreciate that. And, because there's a lot of people in this room who like statistics and numbers, right? And you're talking about the intersection of aging and disability. Fun fact, you are twice as likely to be disabled at 50 as you are at 40, and you're twice as likely to be disabled at 60 as you are at 50, right? So we really can't have the conversation about disability without aging or aging without disability. So for our second and closing round, before we send people back to mingling and eating some birthday cake and all of the things, we would be remiss if we didn't end on a note of really inspiration and vision and giving everyone in this room and the rest of our community marching orders for what we do from here. And so to do that, I'd like to ask the question, I mentioned before the quote about the cornerstone, right? One of my favorite FDR quotes is that he called it a cornerstone in a structure, at Social Security, a cornerstone in a structure which is being built but which is by no means complete. And so as we look ahead to the next 90 years, thinking about Social Security, thinking about the New Deal and so much of the work that is still unfinished from the New Deal, I'd like to ask, what is the work that we still have ahead of us as we think about completing that structure? And Nancy, I'll start with you. I know you have a lot of ideas on this front.
Well, first of all, I loved that Jim Roosevelt said that his father would be thrilled at the program today. What I often say, and I think this is accurate, he would also say, this is all you've done? You haven't done more? I mean, they had a view of, today we call Social Security, very importantly, old age survivors disability insurance. They saw it as basic economic security. So focusing in on old age survivor disability insurance, we should expand the benefits. We should make the benefits so they are fully adequate without supplementation, so to maintain people's standard of living. We should also add other kinds of risks. We started with old age, and then we added family protection, 1939, disability in 56, Medicare in 65. But they talked about then paid sick leave. That was something they considered. They talked about short-term disability.
Really what we're talking about is investing in care.
Beyond that, we should have a living wage. We should have the government be the guarantor, the employer of last resort, so that people have employment. We should expand Medicare and have Medicare for all. All of those fit within the concept of what they had in mind of basic economic security and more.
Jocelyn and Nancy just mentioned paid leave, and it is not perhaps as well known as it should be that paid medical and family leave was actually part of the original vision of the New Deal, and it kind of fell out and doesn't get talked about as much as we do this 90th anniversary reflection as perhaps it deserves. What do you see as the future of the fight for paid leave? How does it connect to the legacy of Social Security? Talk a little bit about that piece.
Sure, absolutely. I think the other layer of this conversation that's relevant for the conversation about paid leave is that really what we're talking about is investing in care support and caregiving. And once you recognize that, you also have to then add on the additional layer is we're used to women doing a lot of care. We're used to women of color doing a lot of care, and we're used to having them do it for little or no pay because we just expect them to do it. And, our economy was built that way, just a layer of effort and work that we just sort of assume that women do, and historically, in particular, assume that women of color do, and assume that they do it with not only low pay or no pay, but little support for sort of caregiving that they may have to do for their own personal reasons or their own individual need. That's sort of where we start. And so I think when I think about the vision for the future and where we're going, it is to understand that investing in care is not simply nice, but it is actually a core economic security issue. It's critical to our economy overall, and it's critical to sort of our economic growth, right? And we do it not because it's nice, but because it's part of what it means to provide sort of a different type of social insurance, right? And I think it's the next stage of the work, and it's why it's so critically important. We are very clear that this paid leave is an economic issue. It is It is certainly an issue of care. Includes women participating in it. And the other piece of that puzzle is, and I know people here know this, if you compare our economy to other countries, one of the reasons we lag behind is because we refuse to sort of get past this notion that we need to invest in women differently. Right, like we don't do it, or we do it based on a model that what didn't work 90 years ago, but it certainly doesn't work now. It assumes sort of a male, sort of, for lack of a better term, a model of worker that doesn't have all of these care needs. And so if that's your model, then you consider it to be outside of sort of the work contract to actually invest in things like care. But for me, part of the reason that it is important to understand the connections of paid leave to Social Security and the initial thinking is because there was a recognition that, social insurance has to touch everybody. And we have to get past this notion that there are only some people who are worth investing in and some people who aren't. And I think if you asked a lot of folks who work on paid leave or the related care issues, childcare and the like, what they would say to you is what I'm going to say now, is that the reason we have found it difficult to make that leap is because women are doing most of the caregiving. Right, and so that's our reality. And so the vision for the future is to get past that notion, that to say, just as it was an important part of the social contract to support aging people, just as it was important to support disabled folks, it's important to support women and women of color who are doing an important part of the economic work that absent that won't get done, right? And that we have to envision it differently as not simply stuff that women do, because in fact there are men who want to do that work too. So at this point in 2025, we ought to be talking about how you invest in it, right? Like, how do you actually make sure it's available to everybody, not just a privileged few? What do those investments look like? What are we thinking about in terms of a vision for the future that recognize not only people have their individual needs, but lots of folks are caregivers, right? Disabled folks are caregivers. They're doing, we have to get beyond these very narrow notions of who people are and who deserve to be helped, right? And the last thing I would say, again, because I can't get enough of talking about that crazy, crazy bill, is that one of the things that's most infuriating is this notion that some people deserve help and other people don't. It's nonsensical. And most people understand it, and they know this too, which is why they lie about it, right? And so our task, our work, the vision for the future is to say lots of people deserve investment and help, right? We are a society that ought to invest in care because care is essential to how we function, right? Like, that's what Social Security understood early on, and we are crazy if we can't figure out how to do it now.
And speaking of people being caregivers, I know there's a lot of people in this room who are caregivers, right? Not just doing this work, right, as a policy person or a researcher or a person who's a public servant, right? But a lot of us are living that, right, with people in our lives that we provide care for, and long-term care, right, being one of those unfinished aspects as well of our social contract. Maria, I'm mindful as I ask this question about unfinished business that we're also marking 35 years of the Americans with Disabilities Act this month, and all July long for a lot of us in the disability community is also Disability Pride Month. So thank you for making some time in Disability Pride Month to come join us. And I know you have a very full dance card right now. But that's another law that has yet to really see its work completed as well. And so I would love to hear your thoughts on the work that lies ahead to ensure that our social contract is inclusive and adequate for people with disabilities.
So I'm going to shift us a little bit to talk about SSI. Newer program, but one that I directly benefited from. I would not be here today were it not for receiving SSI from, age 3 to 22. So at the American Association of People with Disabilities, one of our flagship programs is our internship program. Shout out to the AAPD interns who are in the room tonight. And with this program, we have worked very hard to try to remove every barrier to interning that people might experience. And so we have been paying our interns for a very long time, before it was sexy. And every fall and every summer, we have at least one person who asks, "Can you not pay me?" Because they are so terrified of losing their SSI. And, you know, there's been a lot of progress, things like ABLE accounts, for example. But the culture of benefits is one of such fear that it is very hard to break through that and to establish enough trust to say, no, it is okay for you to get this stipend. We can help you set up an ABLE account. And part of the reason that that fear exists is because the substantial gainful activity limit is so low. And when we talk about Social Security modernization, a part of that conversation has to be modernizing the SGA. Part of the ADA's goals was to ensure that disabled people had an equal shot at employment. And so that, it established reasonable accommodations. It created whole processes around EEO and people with disabilities. But the fact of the matter is that often the very benefit systems that disabled people rely on also cause us to force ourselves either into jobs that are not meaningful or cause us to stay away from working altogether. And SSI was vital for me and my family. It continues to be vital for so many people. People who should be able to establish a plan for their futures. Congressman Steny Hoyer, who helped get the ADA passed, he likes to joke that disabled people are the only ones who want to become taxpayers. And I've heard a couple of folks reference on this stage tonight that young people don't believe that Social Security is going to be around for them. That is not true for young disabled people who are already relying on Social Security and who want to get off of SSI, work, contribute to Social Security so that it is there for them when they become older adults with disabilities, right? And that dream is not guaranteed, but not because they don't think that the trust fund's going to run out of money, because they don't think they're ever going to get a chance to have a meaningful career. And so that has to change. I also, while we're on this topic, talking about the New Deal, I have to talk about the Fair Labor Standards Act in 14C, which was a section in the Fair Labor Standards Act, still exists, that allows you to pay people with disabilities sub-minimum wage. And thankfully, at least 18 states have outlawed or begun to outlaw this practice. But one of the arguments for maintaining this discriminatory practice is the fact that families are afraid their kids will lose benefits. So we can't pay the minimum wage. We must pay them 34 cents an hour, right? And that's just not true. And so when I think about the sort of economic empowerment goals of the Americans with Disabilities Act, Social Security and the broad network of Social Security programs are a huge part of achieving that, but it requires modernization to do so.
It does. Thank you, Maria. So Jason and then Elizabeth, you're going to get the last word to bring us home. So that means you're looking at the two people standing between you and more drinks and cake, in case you were wondering. So Jason, that's just to help make sure Jason doesn't give a long speech. Jason, these are pretty divided times. I think a lot of folks are feeling that right now, and we've had a lot of references to that throughout this evening. But at the same time, we've also heard a lot of references tonight to the fact that Social Security is one of the only things that brings people together. And Deb mentioned the polling that the National Academy of Social Insurance was thrilled to do with AARP. I'll be honest, when we put that poll in the field, I was wondering, were we still going to see agreement on anything? And the answer was yes, everybody, no matter what political stripes or views or walks of life they come from, everybody loves Social Security, wants to see it strengthened, wants to see it secured. What do you think enables it, as we reflect
reflect on 90 years, to bring people across the spectrum together as it has for so long. And as you think about that, what is your advice to this room in terms of the work ahead to help Washington lawmakers work together to ensure that it remains strong and there for the next 90 years?
So the last point allows me to make a big, long speech, which is great. So one, you did a very nice job. So kudos for your discussion and comments. Those are on spot. And I think I want to elaborate on that at the end because I think you've targeted where we need to go. And I think that's very important. So nice job. What I think brings us together on a bipartisan basis is the shared experience and the shared contribution that everyone has to Social Security. They pay into it, they see it as being something they share, and they get a benefit from. And that's why no one wants to see it go away. And there's an old joke that programs for the poor are poor programs, which is why very many people in this room are concerned about trying to do means testing or anything else, because you lose support for it amongst those who have a wide understanding of the shared responsibility and contributions and benefits that everyone gets. That has maintained it, and I think that has to continue to maintain Social Security as a bedrock of financial security and insurance going forward. And some things have come up on three fronts: the retirement, the disability, and SSI. The SSI is a huge importance. We've been doing some work on asset limits. When we think about Social Security and disability and work, the idea still that disability is a binary 0 or 1 is way outdated. So it needs to be more fluid and understand there can be temporary, there can be partial, there can be a lot more things than just 0 or 1. And that 0 or 1 creates perverse incentives, and it also makes it harder for people who want to do some work. So let's change the nature of what disability means in the sense of the social insurance and have a better, more modernized system to encourage and remove barriers to work for those who want to work and can work. That's step one. The SSI asset limits, we just have to modernize that. That is just, hasn't been adjusted for inflation. It's ridiculous. People should be allowed to save. I mean, I don't even know where to start. That's just where it has to go. We just need to change it. On the retirement side, I think when you start thinking about, when we talk about paid leave and caregiving, and you mentioned this is a very important point, it was a shared community type aspect, that people shared in the values, they shared in the contributions, they shared in the benefit. How do we do that going forward? And so what I want to do is, Earl Pomeroy, who is a former Democratic congressman, is not here tonight, he's a board member, but he has been putting in my brain for the last 10, 12, 15 years that we can't keep relying on the payroll tax and labor to fund Social Security. That if we want to do something more, we have to expand the revenue sources for Social Security. And I think we need to start thinking about what that actually means, whether it's a consumption tax, a carbon tax, tariffs. I know it's a weird word right now, but tariffs are revenues if you think about it as an economist. But start thinking about what it means to think about alternative revenue sources to fund the very programs we want that can be community-based. They are widespread. Everyone pays in some way, shape, or form based on whatever the value is or consumption, and that supports different sort of expansions to a program that everyone benefits from. So we got to think about the revenue sources and not just rely on payroll, especially as we start seeing contraction maybe to labor with AI, and who knows what that means going forward. I'm not an AI specialist, but I'm concerned if we put too much on labor that we'll see a decline in labor. So let's figure out how we diversify the revenue sources for the programs we want to enhance or expand and support them. And then start thinking about what a modernized social insurance system looks like, because the time we're living in today is not the same time we were living in 1930. And let's modernize the program.
And that Academy AARP polling, again, that Deb mentioned, found that that idea is really popular, right? People want to see other revenue sources brought in. And Jason, one of my favorite ideas of yours, I don't like all your ideas, but one of my favorite ideas of yours is a carbon tax that would benefit Social Security, right? So I think a lot of good thinking out there. Elizabeth, bring us home. No small task after this panel, which has gone in a lot of directions and had a lot of views and a lot of ideas voiced. But what should we be thinking about as folks leave this room tonight to really think about the next 90 years and the work that we have ahead?
Just taking a big step back, we started with talking about what the world looked like before the New Deal, the place that people were in the sort of psychology of the country in that moment. And we are in a moment where the psychology of the country, to me, is in a similarly perilous state, right? We are in a moment of significant democracy deficit where people are skeptical of institutions. They are skeptical of each other. They are looking for scapegoats, and they are angry. And I don't think I need to say this for anyone. You have spurred us to think about the future, but I think it's so important to remember that while it is the fight of the moment to defend programs like Social Security against imminent threats, it is not the vision that will make anybody feel ready to recommit to this experiment of democracy that we're all a part of. And so to me, it is totally imperative not just to say, what does the future look like, what are the fixes, et cetera, but what is the vision of economic security that feels compelling to people, that gives people a reassurance that this is a democracy and an economy that can actually work for them. I was sitting here being very inspired while you were talking about what true economic security really looks like. If we took a big step back, what are the biggest worries in people's lives? Is it when they need to drop out of the workforce because they're a caregiver? Is it that they may be disabled in a way that they had never imagined before and they can't imagine what their life is going to look like after that? What are the things that people are scared of, and how can we be responsive in a big, visible way to those fears and concerns, in a way that says government is going to show up for you? Again, the way that the New Deal said, bigly and boldly and proudly, government is going to show up. This isn't working for you, and government is going to show up for you. How do we reforge that compact? And the details matter enormously, but they're not enough. I think we have to have a very big public commitment to reforging that compact. I actually really agree that people kind of want something like a contribution economy. People want to be contributors. People want to feel like they're contributing. And what we need to do is widen the aperture about what contribution means, what kinds of contributions we value, and not just in words, but in finances and in deeds. How do we telegraph through our policy that we value each individual, that we understand the diversity of contributions, and that we pay it back and pay it forward, right? And that we do then kind of say we are reforging the compact between the American citizenry and their government and amongst one another in this shared project. What is the big, bold idea that is going to get us all recommitted to that? So that, I guess, is what I would leave everyone with, is to charge us with how do we think about how Social Security can play, the next chapter of Social Security can play the same kind of role that it did with the New Deal in saying, this is a country that is for you, each and every one of you, where you can have a place where you can feel secure, where your family can feel secure, and where you understand that both your government and your neighbors are committed to that for you.
Can I add one last thing just before? No, it's really important.
No, you can't, Jason.
It is important, because you mentioned the compact with the government. So I just wanted, you called out Steve Goss earlier, but I want to just note that there are a lot of former and current SSA employees in the room, including 2 former commissioners, Susan Wilski, Susan Grad, Deb and Jim were former SSA employees, Mark Sarney's here, there's more people, there's Scott Fry, there are more people here that I can name. We just want you to know we've appreciated all the work you do, have done, and will continue to do. And in these times, we support you, so thank you.
All right, Jason, that was a good ad. It was out of line, but it was great. So what a gift this evening has been and will continue to be, because we're keeping the bars open and there's still more food and more time to hang out. But just as we close out, I want to say a huge thank you to the Academy staff, to the Academy interns, to our wonderful events team, Maida and Associates, to our interpreters, to everybody at the press club and everyone behind the scenes who has made this event happen and who's brought us together to celebrate. And I hope that as you leave this room tonight, or if you head back to the bar, if that's where you're going, where there is a lot of wine, we need your help drinking. Oh, a good man, a good man, a good man.
Where's mine?
I hope that you, as you leave this room, you carry with you not only the weight of the legacy that we celebrate tonight, but also the light and the deep knowing that we're all part of something bigger than each of us as an individual doing this work. So I want to invite all of us to raise a glass, which is why the bubbly has been distributed for anyone who wants it. I think it's in service as we mark this anniversary to make a toast. And the toast that I would like to offer tonight is to the generations who built this system, to the public servants and advocates who keep it strong, to the people and values it exists to serve, and to the unfinished work that calls each of us forward. Thank you to each and every person in this room and everyone in the social insurance community for what you do to carry this promise forward, and happy birthday, Social Security. All right, and we're not going anywhere, so keep hanging out. Thanks, everyone.